Manila, February 1945. The air is thick with smoke, blood, and silence. In the ruins of a captured Japanese field hospital, 24 nurses huddle together, believing the end has come. They've been told that American soldiers are monsters, merciless, barbaric, incapable of honor. But when the doors burst open, what greets them isn't execution. It's medicine, electric lights, sterile instruments, a refrigerator filled with blood. And standing before them, an American Army doctor who says something no one expects. "You will not be harmed. We need your help." For Nurse Keiko Yamamoto, that moment shattered everything she thought she knew. What began as captivity soon became revelation, a journey from hatred to humanity, from pride to purpose. And as she stepped deeper into the American field hospital, she discovered a truth her empire could never admit. They weren't just losing the war, they were decades behind in science, compassion, and the future itself. Before we step into this extraordinary true story of courage, discovery, and transformation, take a second to support our work. If you enjoy stories that bring hidden corners of history to life, hit like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who loves powerful human stories. Now, let's return to 1945, where a few nurses discovered that the enemy's greatest weapon wasn't a bomb. It was medicine. Manila, February 1945. The city groaned under the weight of war, its skyline bleeding smoke into the humid sky. Inside a battered concrete field hospital, Nurse Keiko Yamamoto pressed her back against a trembling wall, listening to footsteps approach. Every instinct screamed danger. For 3 years, she'd tended to dying soldiers under impossible conditions, clinging to the belief that Japan's spirit was unbreakable. Yet here, surrounded by silence and surrender, even that conviction began to falter. Around her, 23 other nurses crouched in the dim corridor, uniforms torn and stained with blood that wasn't always their own. The sound of distant gunfire echoed like the final heartbeat of an empire. "They'll kill us," whispered Hana, barely 18, her hands trembling as she clutched a bandage roll like a weapon. Ko didn't answer. She had heard the stories, what happened to Japanese medical staff when captured by Americans. None ended well. Then came the metallic crash of boots. The door burst open. Dust filled the air as 3 American soldiers stormed in, rifles raised. But behind them stood a man whose presence silenced the chaos, a gray-haired officer with a medical insignia gleaming on his collar. "I'm Captain Morrison, United States Army Medical Corps," he said, his Japanese hesitant but clear. "You are now prisoners of war. You will not be harmed." His tone carried neither triumph nor cruelty, only exhaustion. Ko's jaw tightened. Lies. They always began with lies. Yet when she met his eyes, she saw not hatred, but something more complicated. Fatigue, perhaps even pity. It disarmed her more than any weapon could. Morrison gestured toward the door. "We need medical personnel. Our field hospital is overwhelmed. You will work under supervision." His words hung between command and plea. Ko straightened, her pride refusing to bend. "We will not treat American soldiers," she said firmly. "We are loyal to the Emperor." The other nurses nodded. Fear mingled with defiance. To yield would mean shame worse than death, or so they had been taught. Morrison's gaze lingered on her face, searching for something. "You'll treat anyone who needs help," he replied quietly. "That's what doctors and nurses do." The simplicity of his statement unsettled her more than threats ever could. "We are not the same," Ko said. The captain nodded once. "No," he admitted, "but pain is pain, and right now I have 200 wounded men who don't care about politics." His voice carried a weary sincerity she couldn't ignore. One of the younger nurses began to cry softly, and the sound cracked through the still air. Ko felt their terror pressing against her chest. She had been their leader. Their choices were hers to make. "What if we refuse?" she asked. Morrison didn't hesitate. "Then you'll sit in a detention camp until the war ends. Your choice." The calmness in his tone was almost cruel in its certainty. Ko looked at her nurses, frightened faces, eyes filled with questions she couldn't answer. Duty had brought them here, but duty would not protect them now. Her throat tightened. "How many wounded?" she asked finally. 200 and counting, Morrison said. "We took heavy casualties yesterday." His honesty was startling. "What supplies do you have?" she asked. "Come see for yourself," he replied, stepping aside. As they followed him through the ruins, Ko caught glimpses through shattered windows. American soldiers unloading crates, setting up tents, moving with uncanny efficiency. There was no chaos, no shouting, just purpose. Everything she'd been taught said these people were barbarians. Yet what she saw was order, coordination, even discipline. And when she glanced back at Morrison, she saw something she hadn't expected: desperation, not dominance. When they reached the American compound, Ko froze. The air smelled of disinfectant, sharp and unfamiliar. Electric lights glowed beneath canvas tents, their steady brilliance unlike the flickering lamps she'd always known. She felt her throat close. This wasn't the world she had imagined. It was something else entirely, a glimpse into a future her empire had never prepared her to face. And somewhere deep inside, she realized with quiet dread, nothing would ever be the same again. The air inside the American field hospital was nothing like the suffocating rooms Ko had known. Cool, clean, alive with light. Electric bulbs hummed overhead, their glow cutting through the thick scent of antiseptic and metal. Canvas walls divided long corridors where nurses moved with mechanical precision, their footsteps synchronized with the rhythm of clattering instruments. Ko's eyes darted from one marvel to another. Metal tables, shining equipment, bottles labeled in English she could barely read. Captain Morrison guided them forward. "This is the main ward," he said. Rows of wounded men lined the space. Americans, Filipinos, even Japanese soldiers, their faces pale but peaceful. No cries, no chaos. Just quiet efficiency. Ko hesitated near a patient's bed, staring at a clear tube dripping fluid into his arm. "What is this?" she whispered. Morrison followed her gaze. "Intravenous therapy. IV drip." Ko blinked, remembering sketches from old medical journals she'd never believed real. In Japan, such techniques were theory, whispered about in universities, never seen in the field. Yet here, they were routine, performed by young nurses barely older than her youngest assistant. It was both mesmerizing and humiliating. She touched the side of a metal stand, cold and spotless. "You have so many of these," she murmured. Morrison smiled faintly. "Enough for everyone." The words sounded impossible. In her world, there was never enough of anything. Her gaze fell upon a table stacked with uniform bandages, each sealed in paper packaging. She picked one up, marveling at its perfection. "Machine-made," Morrison said. "Sterilized before shipment." Ko almost laughed. Sterile bandages were a luxury she'd never had. Behind her, Hana gasped. "Ko-san, look!" On a tray sat small glass vials filled with clear liquid. "What are those?" Morrison lifted one gently. "Penicillin." The name rolled through the air like a myth spoken aloud. Ko's chest tightened. She had heard rumors, whispers among officers about a miracle drug the Americans used, something that cured infections, thought incurable. She stepped closer, her voice shaking. "You have this here?" "Crates of it," Morrison replied. "We get supply drops every few days." Ko stared at him in disbelief. In her hospitals, they'd lost men daily to infection. Amputations had been routine. and here stood a man casually holding salvation. She followed him to a nearby bed. A young soldier, his abdomen bandaged, slept soundly. 3 days ago, Morrison explained, his wound was infected. We started penicillin last night. He'll be walking again within a week. Ko swallowed hard. That couldn't be true. Abdominal infections were death sentences. Yet the soldier's color looked good, his breathing steady. The chart beside him recorded progress in neat foreign handwriting. Precision she couldn't deny. "Either you're lying," she whispered, "or—" Her voice faltered. "Or what?" Morrison asked gently. "Or everything we've been told about you is wrong." The admission burned her throat. Morrison's expression softened. "Disease is the real enemy, Nurse Yamamoto." His words struck deeper than she expected. She thought of the countless lives lost under her care, men she'd watched fade because they lacked what these Americans treated as ordinary. For the first time, she felt truly powerless. The American nurses moved among the wounded, adjusting tubes, recording temperatures, whispering reassurances. Their calm confidence unsettled Ko. It wasn't arrogance, it was mastery, born of endless practice and abundant resources. Hana tugged her sleeve. "Ko-san, look at their lights." Overhead, bulbs glowed with unbroken steadiness. No flickering candles, no smell of burning oil. Even night would not stop their work. Progress never slept here. Ko exhaled slowly. Every detail screamed of a civilization running on a different rhythm, one that valued precision over faith, systems over slogans. She had entered what felt less like a hospital and more like the future itself. She realized then that this place wasn't just about healing bodies. It was proof, painful, undeniable proof, that while her country fought for glory, the Americans had already conquered something far greater, the science of saving lives. Ko followed Captain Morrison deeper into the medical compound, her footsteps crunching against gravel that had been neatly swept clear of debris. Around her, the American operation unfolded with an astonishing rhythm. Organized chaos turned into efficiency. She had never seen wounded handled this way. Instead of confusion and shouting, there were stations, triage, surgery, recovery, each manned by calm, focused personnel. Every movement served a purpose. Even suffering here seemed to obey a system. Morrison led her into a wide canvas tent, where instruments gleamed under bright white light. "This is the surgical unit," he said, his voice softened by pride and fatigue. Ko froze, overwhelmed by the sight before her. A soldier lay unconscious on an operating table, his chest open, 2 surgeons working silently. Around them, nurses anticipated each command with mechanical precision, passing clamps, sponges, sutures, all without hesitation or waste. It was like watching a living machine. "Clamp," the lead surgeon said. The nurse's hand moved instantly. "Clamp," she echoed, matching tone for tone. Even in Ko's best hospitals in Tokyo, teamwork like this was rare. Here it was second nature. She studied the equipment with a kind of reverent disbelief. Gauges, tubing, pumps, all foreign, all advanced. A device emitted a steady rhythmic sound. Beep, beep, beep. Morrison noticed her fascination. "Heart monitor," he said simply. "Tracks pulse and rhythm." Ko stepped closer, drawn to a metal stand bearing 2 glass containers filled with deep red liquid. Blood transfusions, routine, labeled, standardized. "You're matching blood types," she murmured. Morrison nodded. "Standard procedure. Every patient is typed on admission." Her mind reeled. In Japan, blood transfusion was rare and perilous, often fatal due to mismatched types. "How many have you performed today?" she asked. 43, came the casual answer from a nearby nurse. Ko nearly gasped. Major Patricia Reeves, the chief surgical nurse, lowered her mask and approached with confident ease. You must be the Japanese staff, she said warmly. Ko bowed slightly, though her thoughts raced with awe and confusion. How do you manage this? Ko asked, voice trembling between admiration and despair. Industrial capacity, Reeves replied. Factories back home produce everything you see here. We get daily shipments. Medicine at scale. That's how you save lives. The phrase echoed in Ko's mind. Medicine at scale. Her entire career had been about improvisation, saving what she could with what little she had. Here, improvisation was replaced by abundance. It felt almost cruel in its contrast. Morrison guided her to a refrigerated unit humming softly, a miracle in the tropical heat. Inside were rows of blood bags, neatly labeled by type and date. We call it a mobile blood bank, Reeves explained. Donations fly in weekly. Ko stared, the cold air brushing her face like truth itself. In Japan, even hospitals in major cities struggled for supplies. The gap wasn't merely technological, it was philosophical, a nation's priorities made visible in glass and steel. She turned to Morrison. We were told Americans lacked discipline, she said bitterly, that you depended on machines because you had no spirit. Morrison looked at her for a long moment. Spirit doesn't sterilize instruments, he said quietly. For the first time, Ko didn't know how to respond. Pride had been her armor, but now it felt like lead dragging her down. Around her, science had replaced superstition. Method had conquered myth. She looked again at the surgeons, their precision, their coordination, their calm confidence, and something inside her shifted. Perhaps strength wasn't only about endurance. Perhaps it was also about knowledge, about building systems that protected life instead of glorifying sacrifice. Reeves adjusted her mask and returned to the table. Another life saved, she murmured as the soldier's heartbeat steadied on the monitor. Morrison turned to Ko. This is what victory looks like, Nurse Yamamoto. Not conquest, but survival. Ko stood there, motionless, watching hands move with purpose and compassion intertwined. In that moment, she finally understood. The Americans hadn't just built better hospitals. They had built a better way to fight death itself, and they were winning. The following morning, Ko entered the surgical tent again, unable to resist the pull of curiosity. The smell of disinfectant mingled with heat and tension. Inside, the room pulsed with quiet urgency, every breath synchronized with survival. Major Reeves stood beside the operating table, mask drawn, voice calm and clipped. "Anesthesia ready?" she said. A soldier lay unconscious, chest open beneath the glow of unwavering light. Ko's stomach turned, not from fear but from wonder. This was precision turned into ritual. Tubes pulsed rhythmically, blood bags swayed like pendulums. Each nurse knew her role, moving in a harmony that made chaos seem almost graceful. Ko had never witnessed such orchestration. She stepped closer, drawn by fascination stronger than fear. The heartbeat monitor traced steady peaks across its paper strip. Each line felt like defiance against death itself, mechanical proof that the living could be saved by science. "What's his condition?" Ko asked. Reeves didn't look up. "Shrapnel near the heart. If this were done by lamplight, he'd be dead. With our tools, he's got an 80% chance." Ko blinked. 80%. In Japanese hospitals, survival was often a coin toss. "How do you maintain such odds?" Ko pressed. "Training, supplies, coordination," Reeves answered. "We standardize everything. No improvisation, no guesswork. We trust process, not luck." Ko absorbed the words like commandments. Her own training had worshipped instinct and spirit, but here reason reigned supreme. The contrast was staggering, a clash between ideology and practicality, between willpower and structure. Reeves gestured toward the refrigeration unit. "We store blood, Plasma, saline, everything we might need. We don't run out. Ko stared inside. Neat rows of life preserved in glass. A quiet triumph of preparation. The realization struck her hard. The Americans hadn't simply advanced through courage. They'd industrialized compassion. Every life saved was a product of foresight, logistics, and relentless organization. It was mercy, manufactured at scale. Ko watched Reeves guide the surgeons with subtle gestures. Clamp. Suction. Suture. No raised voices, no panic. Even their silence carried authority. Every movement built upon experience, discipline, and something rarer, trust. Her thoughts drifted to the field hospitals she had left behind. Flickering lanterns, dull instruments, bandages washed and reused until they dissolved. There, every operation was a prayer. Here, it was precision-engineered certainty. "Why teach us this?" Ko asked softly. Reeves looked up, eyes sharp, yet kind. "Because when the war ends, someone will have to rebuild. Japan will need people who understand the future." The words landed heavier than any accusation. Ko realized that even her captors saw beyond the present moment of war. They weren't just saving lives, they were planting seeds for what came after. Morrison entered mid-surgery, his uniform streaked with dust. "How's he doing?" Reeves replied, "Stable, closing soon." Morrison nodded, then turned to Ko. "See this? This is why we build systems, not heroes." Ko frowned. "Heroes?" Morrison's tone softened. "War glorifies sacrifice. Medicine glorifies survival. One destroys, the other preserves. That's the only kind of victory worth chasing." The simplicity of it left her speechless. The surgeon made his final stitch. The patient's pulse steadied on the monitor. Reeves exhaled through her mask. "Another one saved," she murmured. Ko stared, awestruck, realizing she'd just watched a miracle performed as if routine. As she left the tent, the humid air hit her like a wall. Around her, the hospital buzzed with purpose, voices calm, movements deliberate. Ko felt something shift inside her, fragile but undeniable, the first stirrings of humility. She had walked into this place expecting to see her enemy. Instead, she had found the embodiment of everything her nation lacked: discipline, innovation, and an unshakable belief that saving a life mattered more than winning a war. And as dusk fell over the camp, the glow of electric light spilled through the tent flaps, painting the ground gold. It felt less like illumination and more like revelation, a glimpse into a civilization that healed faster than it hated. The call for help came at dawn. Ambulances rolled into the compound, their engines coughing in the humid air. Ko stepped outside the tent, squinting as stretchers began to appear, lined with wounded soldiers, Japanese uniforms among them. She froze. The sight of her own countrymen being carried by American medics sent her stomach twisting. These were her people. Broken, bleeding, treated gently by the very hands she'd been taught to despise. Captain Morrison approached, his tone urgent but composed. "We recovered them near the front line. Many don't speak English. They're terrified. We need you and your nurses to assist." His eyes searched hers for trust. Ko hesitated. Helping them meant collaboration. Refusing meant betrayal of her oath. She felt the weight of two worlds pressing on her chest. "We'll help," she finally said. "But they'll think this is a trap." "They'll believe you," Morrison replied. "Tell them they're safe." The words sounded impossibly naive, yet his sincerity was disarming. Ko turned to her nurses, saw fear mirrored in their faces, and nodded once. "We translate. We calm them." As the stretchers came closer, Ko knelt beside a young Japanese soldier, no older than 20. His leg was mangled, his face pale with shock. When he saw her uniform, tears filled his eyes. "Yamamoto-san?" he whispered. You're alive? His voice cracked. They'll kill us. Ko took his trembling hand. No, they won't. These doctors will treat you. They've saved others. You must trust me. He shook his head violently. They're Americans. The word carried venom, generations of indoctrinated fear. Ko felt his pulse flutter beneath her fingers. Yes, she said softly, but they're also healers, and right now so am I. Nearby, an American medic held an IV bag aloft, murmuring soothing nonsense to another Japanese soldier who couldn't understand him. The gentle tone, though foreign, carried something unmistakable. Compassion without agenda. Ko translated quickly, her voice trembling. He's giving you medicine. He wants to save your leg. The soldier stared in disbelief, then weakly nodded. For the first time, cooperation bloomed where hatred had been planted. Morrison passed by, his hands red with blood. You're doing good work, he said, without looking up. Ko wanted to protest that she wasn't doing it for him, but the words wouldn't come. The truth felt simpler. Her nurses moved between stretchers, translating, assisting, comforting. The chaos of languages merged into a rhythm that transcended nationality. Medical urgency, creating its own universal dialect. Pain didn't discriminate, and neither, it seemed, did mercy. When Ko saw one of her countrymen being prepped for surgery, she stepped in instinctively. He's afraid of anesthesia, she explained to Reeves. The major met her eyes and nodded. Then show him. Let him see you trust us. Ko placed a hand on the soldier's shoulder. They saved others already, she whispered in Japanese. Sleep now. You'll wake alive. Slowly, his breathing steadied. The syringe entered his vein, and he slipped into oblivion. Hana watched nearby, tears brimming. Ko-san, what are we doing? She whispered. Ko answered without hesitation. We're doing what nurses are meant to do. We save lives. It doesn't matter whose uniform they wear. The words startled even her. They felt treasonous, yet profoundly true. Every day since her capture had peeled away another layer of the propaganda she'd once believed sacred. Here, truth revealed itself not in ideology, but in compassion. When the last stretcher was carried inside, Ko stood in silence. Around her, Americans and Japanese worked side by side, divided by language but united by urgency. She realized she was witnessing something extraordinary, enemies choosing empathy over vengeance. As night descended, Ko walked past the rows of recovering patients. American and Japanese soldiers lay only feet apart, identical in their exhaustion, identical in their fragile humanity. The realization struck her with quiet, painful clarity. They had never been so different after all. For the first time, she didn't feel like a prisoner or an enemy. She felt something far more dangerous and liberating, human. And as she looked across the dimly lit ward, Keiko Yamamoto understood that the true battlefield wasn't out there. It was in the heart. 3 days later, the laboratory tent buzzed with low hums of machinery and quiet voices. The air smelled faintly of alcohol and something sweet, medicinal. Ko stood beside Major Reeves, staring through the lens of a microscope. What she saw made her breath hitch. Tiny shapes, writhing like translucent worms, breaking apart under invisible force. Reeves leaned close, her voice calm but reverent. That's penicillin at work. It attacks the bacterial walls, makes them collapse. Ko blinked. She had studied such diagrams in Tokyo, always theoretical, abstract. But seeing it alive, bacteria dying before her eyes, felt like watching death itself being reversed by human will. It bordered on magic. In Japan, she murmured, we thought this was rumor, propaganda. Reeves smiled faintly. So did we once. 2 years ago, penicillin was experimental. Now it saves thousands weekly. The statement sounded casual, but its meaning thundered in Ko's chest. 2 years. In 2 years, America had turned theory into routine, discovery into production. It wasn't just brilliance, it was infrastructure, unity, commitment. Science there didn't crawl, it marched, and her people had been left behind. Reeves gestured to shelves lined with medical journals. Our universities, our industries, they work together. Factories make medicine, not just weapons. That's why our soldiers live. The quiet pride in her voice was unforced, even gentle. Ko touched one of the glass slides, as if it might contain answers. "We were told spirit was everything," she whispered. "That courage would conquer any deficit." Reeves nodded sadly. "Spirit matters, but so does penicillin." That simple statement cut deeper than insult. It dismantled every sermon Ko had ever heard about divine victory and national pride. Spirit couldn't cure infection. Loyalty couldn't stop fever. Science, quietly, had replaced faith as salvation. Through the canvas wall, Ko could hear groans of recovering men. Japanese and American both. Some were alive only because of this drug. The realization was dizzying. A vial smaller than her thumb could undo centuries of suffering. Reeves handed her a medical log. "We track every case. Dosages, outcomes, side effects. Knowledge builds reliability." Ko scanned the rows of neat English handwriting. Such precision was foreign to her chaotic wartime experience. It felt sacred. "You treat enemy soldiers too," Ko said softly. Reeves's answer was immediate. "Infection doesn't care about flags. Neither should medicine." The line felt heavy with meaning, a philosophy disguised as procedure. Ko turned from the microscope to the window flap. Outside, the hospital moved like a living organism. Nurses, medics, mechanics, all part of a single purpose. It was more than a system. It was civilization applied to compassion. She swallowed hard. "Why show us this? Why teach prisoners?" Reeves studied her for a moment. "Because this war will end, and your country will need people who know what progress looks like." Her tone was matter-of-fact, not patronizing. Ko realized, with a shock of humility, that these Americans were already thinking beyond victory. They weren't building an empire, they were building continuity. Even amid war, they planned for peace. That was true power. She glanced down at the microscope again, at the dying bacteria. "Penicillin kills infection," she said. "But maybe knowledge kills ignorance." Reeves smiled. "Exactly. And you, Nurse Yamamoto, are learning fast." Ko thought of Hana outside, of the nurses practicing with IV drips and blood-typing charts. In weeks, they had adapted, evolving under pressure. Change was painful, but it was happening. The thought both frightened and thrilled her. Reeves began cleaning the instruments. "When this is over," she said quietly, "take what you've learned home. Teach others. Medicine should serve humanity, not ideology." The words etched themselves into Ko's mind, heavier than any command. As Ko stepped into the sunlight, the world around her seemed sharper, brighter, filled with a strange kind of hope. The war still raged beyond the horizon, but she had glimpsed something more powerful than conquest, understanding. And that, she realized, was its own revolution. The news reached the camp just after sunset. Heavy fighting had resumed near Manila, and ambulances were already on their way. The hospital, still recovering from the last wave, braced for another night of chaos. Captain Morrison gathered his staff in the main corridor, fatigue etched into every face. "We're expecting more than 100 casualties within the hour," he said. "Everyone, American or Japanese, will be needed." His gaze landed on Ko. For a moment, the words didn't register. He was trusting her, a prisoner, with American lives. "You want me to assist in surgery?" she asked cautiously. Morrison nodded. "You know the protocols. You're ready." Ko's throat tightened. Weeks ago, she would have refused out of pride or fear of betrayal. Now, something different stirred in her, a quiet conviction born not from obedience, but from purpose. "I'll do it," she said. When the ambulances arrived, the night erupted in motion. Lanterns swung, stretchers clattered, voices shouted orders in English and Japanese alike. The boundary between captor and captive blurred beneath the urgency of human survival. Ko and Hana rushed to the triage line, translating for panicked Japanese soldiers. "You're safe," Ko repeated again and again, her words steadier than she felt. "They will treat you. They will save you." Inside the surgical tent, Major Reeves already stood scrubbed and focused. "Ko, you're with me," she said. A young American lay on the table, chest torn by shrapnel. His skin was gray, pulse erratic. "We move fast." Ko slipped into the rhythm almost instinctively. Hands washed, mask tied, tools arranged. Her body remembered every motion from weeks of observation. Yet tonight, something in her felt different. No longer an outsider, but part of the current. "Clamp!" Reeves said sharply. "Clamp!" Ko echoed, placing it in her hand without hesitation. The synchronization sent a strange pride through her veins. They were enemies by definition, but partners in purpose. The soldier's heartbeat fluttered on the monitor. "Pressure's dropping," the anesthetist warned. "Find the leak," Reeves commanded. Ko scanned the surgical field, spotting a kinked tube in the transfusion line. "Here!" she called, fixing it immediately. Blood flowed again. The monitor steadied. Reeves glanced up, a rare smile breaking through her mask. "Good catch, Yamamoto. You just saved his life." Ko froze, breathless. The praise felt like redemption and revelation intertwined. Hours passed like minutes. One surgery ended, another began. American and Japanese nurses worked side by side, their exhaustion erased by adrenaline. The sound of scalpels and sutures replaced the sound of gunfire outside. Between operations, Morrison appeared at the tent entrance, his voice low but urgent. "You can stop if you need rest." Ko shook her head. "If they don't stop, neither will I." For once, he didn't argue. In the blur of effort, Ko noticed something remarkable. No one looked at her as a prisoner anymore. Orders flowed naturally between languages. The war outside had momentarily disappeared, replaced by a fragile, functional peace. As dawn crept through the seams of the canvas, the last patient was wheeled to recovery. Ko's arms trembled from fatigue, but her spirit felt steadier than it ever had. Reeves turned to her, eyes soft. "You did well." Ko glanced toward the sleeping soldier whose life she'd helped save. "He's American," she said quietly. "Doesn't matter," Reeves replied. "He's alive." The simplicity of it made Ko's eyes sting. She had spent years defining worth by allegiance. Stepping out into the early light, Ko inhaled the scent of disinfectant and morning dew. For the first time, she didn't feel divided between duty and conscience. The line between enemy and ally had dissolved into something profoundly human. She realized then that she had already made her choice, not as a soldier of empire nor as a prisoner of war, but as a nurse. Her allegiance was no longer to victory or defeat, but to life itself. As the sun rose over the camp, she closed her eyes briefly, letting its warmth touch her face. Somewhere deep inside, she whispered a quiet promise to herself. "Never again will I let hatred decide who deserves to be healed." 2 weeks later, the air in the camp felt heavier, charged with unspoken tension. Rumors of Japan's collapse spread like infection, whispered through corridors, carried by radio static, confirmed in the anxious eyes of prisoners and guards alike. Ko stood near the supply tent, reviewing medical logs. Her Japanese patients were healing. Some even walked again. Yet joy didn't come. Beneath every heartbeat lay a question that gnawed at her. What happens when this war ends? Hana approached quietly, her face pale. "Ko-san," she whispered, "the others are talking. They say we'll be punished when we return for helping Americans." Her voice trembled between fear and disbelief. "They call it treason." Ko closed the ledger slowly. "We saved lives, Hana. There's no shame in that." But she knew the truth. Honor codes back home left no space for nuance. In their culture, survival under surrender was already sin enough. Before Ko could respond, the tent flap opened sharply. Major Reeves entered, urgency cutting through the silence. "We have a situation," she said. "Japanese officer. Critical condition. He's refusing treatment. Says he'll die before being touched by Americans." Ko's pulse quickened. "Take me to him." Inside the emergency ward, a colonel lay pale and sweating, clutching a pistol despite his mangled arm. "Stay back," he shouted in Japanese. "I'll not be humiliated by enemy hands." Ko stepped forward cautiously. "Colonel, I am Nurse Yamamoto, Imperial Japanese Army Medical Corps. Please, let us help you." His eyes widened. "You? Working with them? You disgrace your uniform." His words sliced sharper than any blade. "They can save you," Ko insisted. "You've lost too much blood." He spat weakly. "Better to die with honor than live with shame." Around them, American doctors stood frozen, unwilling to move without her cue. She swallowed her pride and tried again. "These people saved our wounded, Japanese soldiers, your men. They use medicine we don't even have. Penicillin, blood banks, refrigeration." He glared. "Lies, American trickery." She pointed at the patient beside him, alive, recovering. "That man was dying 2 days ago. Now he breathes because they treated him." The colonel's hand shook, the pistol wobbling. "You've betrayed the Emperor," he whispered. Ko's voice steadied. "No, I've served life itself. That is what medicine demands." Silence fell. Sweat rolled down the colonel's temple. "Japan will fight until victory," he gasped. Ko stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Colonel, Japan has already lost. We were never equipped to win. You know this in your heart." His eyes filled with exhaustion and disbelief. "Traitor," he muttered, but the gun slipped from his fingers, clattering to the floor. "I'm so tired." Ko caught his hand gently. "Then rest. Let them save you. Live to tell others what you saw." The American surgeons moved instantly, rolling him toward the operating table. Ko backed away, trembling. She had just spoken treason aloud, and yet, for the first time, she felt utterly at peace with her own defiance. Captain Morrison appeared beside her, his expression grave but approving. "That was brave," he said. "That was necessary," Ko corrected. "How many will die clinging to pride?" Morrison exhaled, gaze distant. "Fewer, because you were here to show them otherwise." Outside, the humid night pressed heavy against the tents. Somewhere in the distance, artillery thundered, a fading echo of a war nearly over. But within the hospital walls, something entirely new was being born. Cooperation, understanding, hope. Ko stared toward the surgical ward where American and Japanese hands worked together without hesitation. It was a sight her old self would have called impossible. Now, she couldn't imagine the world without it. When the colonel emerged hours later, alive, sedated, arm-bandaged, Ko exhaled shakily. Honor hadn't saved him. Medicine had. The realization struck like lightning. The future would belong not to those who fought hardest, but to those who healed fastest. That night, as the camp quieted, Hana found her sitting alone outside. "Ko-san," she whispered, "what will we do when they send us home?" Ko looked toward the glowing horizon. "We'll bring the truth with us," she said, "even if it costs everything." The wind carried faint traces of burning cities from afar. Ko closed her eyes and listened to the heartbeat of the camp, the hum of generators, the rustle of nurses preparing supplies. For the first time, surrender didn't feel like defeat. It felt like rebirth. Tokyo, March 1946. The war was over, but the silence it left behind was deafening. Buildings stood gutted like open wounds, streets buried under ash. Keiko Yamamoto stepped through the ruins of her homeland, clutching a notebook filled with plans. The once proud imperial capital smelled of smoke and despair. Where hospitals had stood, there were skeletons of brick and twisted iron. Yet in that desolation, Ko saw possibility, because where everything was broken, rebuilding could finally begin. Beside her, Hana carried a clipboard, her expression hardened by experience. "This is where the new hospital will rise," Ko said softly. "Here, among the ashes, we'll teach medicine for peace, not war." Skeptical voices murmured behind them. A group of young medical students, barefoot, thin, eyes hollow with hunger, watched her with disbelief. "Rebuild with what?" one asked bitterly. "We have nothing left." Ko smiled faintly. "Then we'll start with what matters most, knowledge." Dr. Sato, the seasoned surgeon who had returned with them from Manila, joined her side. "The Americans are sending equipment," he said. "Funding too. They believe in your project, Yamamoto." His tone held both admiration and a quiet warning. Ko nodded. "They aren't our masters," she said. "They're partners. We'll accept help, but this will be our hospital. Japanese hands, Japanese spirit, new medicine." The students exchanged uneasy glances, torn between pride and survival. That afternoon, they cleared rubble by hand. Smoke stung their eyes, blistered palms bled. Every brick lifted felt like defiance against despair. Hana's voice broke the silence. "Ko-san, do you really think this place can heal?" Ko paused, wiping sweat from her forehead. "It has to," she said. "If it doesn't, then everything we endured, every life we saved in Manila, will have meant nothing." The conviction in her tone silenced doubt for a moment. Days turned into weeks. American trucks rumbled in with crates of supplies, surgical kits, microscopes, textbooks translated into Japanese. Locals gathered to watch, whispering disbelief. "Why would the victors share their secrets?" one man muttered. "Because they're done fighting," Ko replied. Inside a half-rebuilt lecture hall, Ko addressed her new students. "Medicine isn't about nationalism," she said firmly. "It's about humanity. If you want to restore Japan, start by learning how to keep its people alive." Dr. Sato added, "Courage didn't lose us the war. Ignorance did. We can't fix the past with pride. Only progress will save us now." The room fell silent, words sinking like seeds into wounded hearts. At night, Ko reviewed her plans by candlelight, hospital blueprints, training modules, vaccination drives. She wrote letters to Major Reeves and Captain Morrison, updating them on their progress. "You gave us tools," she wrote. "We're building the future with them." Weeks later, the hospital's first ward opened. 12 beds, one operating room, a single generator humming steadily. The patients were civilians, not soldiers. Malnourished children, laborers with infected wounds, mothers weakened by fever. Healing Japan began with the forgotten. Hana stood by Ko's side during the first surgery. The equipment gleamed, sterile and efficient. "Remember when we boiled scalpels in rice water?" Hana whispered. Ko smiled sadly. "Now we sterilize them with steam. We've come far." The operation succeeded. A small victory, but one that rippled through the staff like sunlight after endless rain. Word spread quickly about the hospital that treated all who entered without rank or wealth or shame. One afternoon, a familiar figure arrived, Captain Morrison, now in civilian clothes. "I had to see it with my own eyes," he said, awe in his voice. "You've done in months what took us years." Ko bowed deeply. "We learned from the best," she said. Morrison smiled. "No, You adapted what you learned. That's harder. He handed her an envelope. The U.S. Medical Corps wants to fund exchange programs. Doctors, nurses, research. Ko opened it with trembling hands. Why me? Morrison's eyes softened. Because you understand both sides of war and peace. You bridge worlds. Ko felt the weight of that truth settle across her shoulders like both burden and blessing. That night, standing atop the hospital's half-built steps, she looked across Tokyo's broken skyline. Generators hummed softly, their lights reflecting against shattered glass. For the first time, she didn't see ruins. She saw scaffolds for rebirth. The city still mourned its losses, but the hospital glowed like a heartbeat in the dark. Ko realized then that healing a nation wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about refusing to repeat it. The work had just begun, and as dawn crept over the horizon, Ko whispered to the rising sun, "We lost the war of weapons, but not the war of wisdom." For the first time since captivity, she believed every word. By 1948, the hospital stood tall in the center of a recovering Tokyo, a symbol of defiance, not through power, but through progress. Its walls were pale and clean, echoing with voices of doctors, nurses, and hope. Ko Yamamoto walked its corridors every morning before sunrise, her white coat fluttering in the breeze from open windows. She still felt ghosts here, echoes of Manila, the faces of soldiers who'd lived because of mercy. Inside the main ward, Japanese and American doctors worked side by side, exchanging knowledge without suspicion. The hum of sterilizers replaced the sound of gunfire. Every heartbeat here testified that healing had become their new revolution. Dr. Sato entered, carrying a clipboard. "2 more patients recovered overnight," he said proudly, "and the students finished their first blood typing course." Ko smiled faintly. "We're catching up," she said, "slowly but surely." The words carried both pride and gratitude. On her desk lay a letter from Major Reeves. "Your progress inspires us all," it read. "Remember, rebuilding takes longer than destruction, but its results last forever." Ko traced the handwriting, imagining Reeves's steady voice across the ocean. The first class of Japanese nurses graduated that spring. Ko stood before them in the lecture hall, sunlight washing over their faces. "Medicine doesn't serve nations," she told them. "It serves humanity. Never forget that lesson." Outside, children lined up for vaccinations, their laughter blending with the rhythmic hiss of pressurized syringes. Each needle carried something greater than medicine. It carried proof that Japan's survival no longer depended on conquest, but on compassion. Weeks later, a delegation from the U.S. Army Medical Corps arrived. Among them was Captain Morrison, older, grayer, his posture still firm. When he saw Ko, his smile broke the stiffness of protocol instantly. "You've built more than a hospital," he said. "You've built a bridge." Ko bowed deeply. "You once told me mercy could be industrialized," she said. "I thought it sounded cold, but now I understand. It means making compassion unstoppable." They toured the wards together. Morrison marveled at the sterilization units, the X-ray machines, the students debating surgical technique. "When I first met you, you refused to treat American soldiers," he said quietly. "Now you're training the future." Ko smiled. "I was a different person then. I thought mercy was weakness." Morrison nodded. "And now?" She looked at the nurses tending patients, at the hum of coordinated care. "Now I know. It's the strongest force we have." After his departure, Ko walked through the laboratory where researchers studied new antibiotics sent from abroad. The hum of equipment filled her ears like a hymn. Once, war machinery had dominated the world. Now, engines of healing took its place. Dr. Sato joined her, his eyes reflecting the glow of microscopes. "Do you ever think about Manila?" he asked. Every day, Ko admitted. That was where I first saw what medicine could truly be. Organized mercy. Industrialized mercy, Sato corrected softly. You've made it real here. That's no small miracle. Ko smiled, remembering how strange that phrase had once sounded amid battlefields and fear. Now, it defined her life's work. Years passed. The hospital grew into a network of clinics, universities, and research centers. Japanese doctors studied abroad. American professors lectured in Tokyo. The gap that once separated them had narrowed into collaboration. Knowledge flowed like blood between nations. One morning, Ko stood at the new pediatric wing, where children recovered from pneumonia with antibiotics once unimaginable in Japan. A nurse handed her a report. Mortality has dropped 70% this year. Ko nodded, eyes glistening. That's victory. When journalists asked her about her legacy, she answered simply, the real victory was never about defeating enemies. It was about defeating disease. Once we understood that, we finally became civilized. Her words rippled through newspapers worldwide. Years later, long after Morrison and Reeves had passed, Ko still made her morning rounds, cane tapping softly on polished floors. Students greeted her as sensei, unaware of the battles she'd fought to earn that title. One evening, she stood before a new class of medical students, gray hair tied neatly, voice steady as ever. When I first saw penicillin destroy bacteria, she said, I realized we weren't behind forever. We were only unprepared to learn. The room fell silent. She looked out at their young faces and smiled faintly. The future doesn't belong to those who fight hardest. It belongs to those who heal fastest. Remember that, and never stop learning. As she left the hall, lights dimming behind her, the hum of the hospital carried into the night. Outside, Tokyo gleamed, alive, modern, merciful. The empire had fallen, but something far greater had risen in its place, a nation reborn through the science of compassion.